some terrifying reads for the autumn season. First up on our list is a classic. It's M.R. James' Ghost Stories. Now, perhaps you're really busy this autumn season. Perhaps you don't have time to sit down and read a full spooky novel. I've got you covered. These short stories are the place to begin. Now, M.R. James, in case you've never encountered him before, was born in 1862 and he died in the 1930s. And he straddled that really interesting time between the end of the Victorian era and the beginning of war-torn 20th century life. And his stories are incredibly unnerving. He was a Cambridge Don and a medieval scholar, and he was really, really interested in objects, the power that historical artefacts held, the stories that they held within them, and indeed the power that we ourselves in the present give back to them. And there are so many classics in here, and of course, for anyone who is familiar with M.R. James, you'll know that his stories have been adapted for TV and film for many decades now. You've got some real classics like Canon Albrecht's Scrapbook, you've got The Number 13, you've got Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You My Lad. But I'm going to take you through my top three. These are just my favourites. They're really varied in terms of the tone, in terms of the kind of horror or haunting that they give you, and I think they're just brilliant. With these words, the excellent man went to continue the round of his masters, and you may be sure the gentleman whom he left lost no time in gathering round the engraving. There was the house, as before, under the waning moon and the drifting clouds. The window that had been open was shut, and the figure was once more on the lawn, but not this time crawling cautiously on hands and knees. Now it was erect and stepping swiftly with long strides towards the front of the picture. This is the mezzotint. This is one of the most terrifying short stories I think I've ever read. It's the tale of an antique artwork, an engraving that's brought into an Oxbridge college by some unsuspecting scholar, and at first nothing seems awry. It's simply a picture of an 18th century house set in some grounds at night. But soon, as the rhythms of college life move on around this scholar, the slow mode of studying, the rituals of taking tea, of taking meals, of visiting the dons, all of that falls away when he realises at night the picture comes alive and a figure crawls out of the shadows towards the house to do something truly terrible. Next up, we have The Ash Tree. Now, The Ash Tree is a really classic M.R. James in that it's told through multiple voices. This is a staple, of course, of the ghost story genre, and M.R. James is really the master of this. But the story that we get is that of an ancient house, and next to the house is this huge, wizened, old ash tree. Now, of course, things are going to go awry. The tree behaves in a strange way, and there are movements in the dark associated with it. I will say this, it is not a story to read if you're afraid of spiders. In at first place, though, is A View from a Hill. This is a fascinating story that is all about a man who goes out to the countryside, and in the house he's staying in, he finds a pair of old binoculars or some kind of ocular device. He's not really sure. They appear at first not to work properly. And he spends his days cycling around, walking around the landscape that he finds himself in, and tries at various points to look through this device to the hills in the distance. And when he does so, what he sees terrifies him. Now, this is a story about the English landscape, the British landscape really, but I think specifically the English landscape and the layers of history that we have there, not only in terms of archaeology, but in terms of memory, human memory, but also landscape memory. And what this story gives us is a really blood-soaked, violent landscape that reveals itself to people at moments of crisis in these interesting and very frightening ways. Next we have Elizabeth Gaskell. Now, Elizabeth Gaskell is very much a 19th century writer. She was born in 1810 during the Regency, but she died in 1865, and she's really known today as a Victorian novelist. She was also famously the biographer of Charlotte Bronte and was very good friends with the Bronte family, and you find those same Gothic threads in her work. I love Elizabeth Gaskell's ghost stories so much. I actually have 2 copies, and they both have completely beautiful covers. I don't know which one I prefer really, but the story within them that I wanted to focus on is called The Old Nurse's Tale. She said she had heard the tale from old neighbours that were alive when she was first married, when folks used to come to the hall sometimes before it had got such a bad name in the countryside. It might not be true, or it might, what she'd been told. What Gaskell's so brilliant at is evoking place so powerfully, and she gives us this almost dreamlike location. We've got this snowy, bleak landscape somewhere in the north of England. We've got an isolated old house filled with elderly women that a young nurse and her infant charge, a little girl, are brought to. We've got ghostly children who haunt the night, and we have a phantom organ that plays when the household have gone to bed. The final book that I want to talk about is this, E.J. Gilbert's Haunted. Now, this is new out this year, and the subtitle is Ghost Stories and Their Afterlives. Now, E.J. Gilbert is an academic. She holds a PhD in, I think, applied linguistics, and she's really, really interested in the form of the ghost story, the way that we tell those stories and what they mean to us, how they can bring communities together, how they can give us a sense of place as well as a sense of horror and fear. It is a non-fiction book, but it has this brilliant conversational quality, and what Gilbert gives us is a selection of stories that she has curated and that she tells back to us. She is the ghost storyteller. I want to read you this from the introduction. She writes, "The late Hilary Mantel once described ghosts as the tags and rags of everyday life, information you acquire that you don't know what to do with. In telling each other ghost stories, we're peeling back not only the layers of our communities, but also ourselves. A tale that twists in the telling is not a lie, but alive, a haunting in progress. So come on, sit down, close your eyes, whistle, and I'll come to you. Let's tell some ghost stories."